Good evening, everyone. My name is Greg Kay. I am the Commissioner of the Commonwealth Coast Conference, and I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's professional preparation panel. We have a tremendous group of panelists with us, all of whom have different connections to the CCC, and I think they're going to share some great advice for those who are just starting out on their professional path, and also those who may be looking forward to a change in their professional path. Our moderator for the evening is Doug Chin. Doug is the CCC Associate Commissioner, and he'll be leading the conversation. So thanks again for joining us. Doug, it's all yours.
Thank you, Greg. And once again, good evening, everyone. As Greg mentioned, my name is Doug Chin. I'm the Associate Commissioner of the conference here. We're thrilled that you could join us tonight for our CCC Professional Preparation Panel. It's the sixth installment of our Student Athlete Development Series. Tonight's panel features 4 talented individuals at various stages in their career, all with some connection to the CCC. During tonight's discussion, they will discuss their paths they took to get where they are, and also offer some advice to others on things that they should be doing and should be cognizant of as they get ready to enter the workforce right out of college or are looking for the next step in their careers. So at this time, we're going to take the opportunity to let the panel introduce themselves. If you could just give your name, what your current position is, and what your connection is to the CCC. The first person on my panel here is Allie, so why don't you go first?
Thanks, Doug and Greg. My name's Allie Paquette. I graduated from Salve, Regina University in 2013, and I'm currently the Assistant Director of Athletic Communications at Middlebury College.
Thank you. Let's go to Emily.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. I graduated from Lasalle University in 2013. Shortly after, worked at Lasalle, then moved on to Wentworth as my first connection to the CCC. And now I am the social media manager at Curry College, which is obviously in the CCC.
Thank you. Shawn Medeiros.
Thanks, Doug. Happy to be here with everyone. My name is Shawn Medeiros. I'm currently the Sports Information Director at Endicott College. And I did my undergrad at Bridgewater State, and I also did my master's at Castleton State, so 2 D3 schools.
And last but not least, Kristen.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Kristen. I am currently the Athletic Communications grad assistant at Bryant University. I graduated from Johnson & Wales in 2018, and I used to intern with the CCC a few years back, so that is my big connection to the conference.
All right, thank you, everyone, and we're thrilled to have you all today. Now, some of you touched on your paths during your introductions, but if we could just elaborate on everybody's path they took to get to the positions they are today. I still see Kristen here on my screen. So, Kristen, can you just kind of elaborate kind of the step-by-step process it took to your current position at Bryant?
Yeah, so definitely an interesting one. You know, we rewind a little bit to my undergrad. I actually started out as a fashion merchandising major and then switched to sports management after about a week into it. And, you know, it was really kind of a long road to try to figure out what I wanted to do as far as a career. You know, after interning with you guys, I found a love for college athletics and wanted to stick with it. I also interned at Roger Williams University in the CCC, and you know, it just furthered my career choice. And you know, I kind of just saw the Bryant listing. I applied, and it was a very last minute thing on how I got the position. I actually started off as an intern for them. So this is actually my 3rd year at Bryant. And yeah, it was really last minute. I was actually working at sports camp at Curry College, weirdly enough. And I got the call and late July, and they were like, all right, do you want to start in like a week? And I was like, okay, guess we're doing this. So, so yeah, I mean, that's just kind of a short version of how I got to where I am right now.
Next, I want to go to Shawn to just kind of have you illustrate your path to your SID position at Endicott.
So as an undergrad at Bridgewater State, I first wanted to do play-by-play broadcasting more or less for baseball. Decided that that wasn't the route I wanted to go for a number of reasons. Actually considered coaching high school track and field and cross country for a little while. But through an internship with the Boston Globe and some friends who had previously worked in the business, Steve Miller, who used to work at Worcester State, I found that sports information kind of melded all of the things I was interested in into one sort of package in a position. So luckily, after failing miserably to find a graduate assistant position for over what felt like 100 applications, I got the chance to do my graduate degree at Castleton University, then Castleton State College under Jeff Weld, who has been a massive mentor for me since then. That was really my introduction into sports information. After that, I worked at Stonehill College, D2, and then Wheaton College in Massachusetts before I landed at Endicott. So I think, like everyone will kind of notice here, our paths haven't been linear, but all of those experiences have helped us to where we are now and how we can be successful in our roles.
And as a communications genius, Shawn, you've teed me up for a perfect segue. Allie, when we talk about paths not being linear, you kind of have a little bit of a unique path in terms of this group. Can you just kind of talk about how you got to your current position from where you started?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I definitely had a really unique journey to this profession. When I graduated from Salve, I had a degree in biology. So I started out working in a couple of different laboratory settings, doing research. Thought that was what I wanted to do, found out very quickly that was absolutely not what I wanted to do. And then I think because I was a student athlete, I had just felt like a part of my life was missing, not being like attached to sports anymore. And so I went back to school to get my master's in sport management and athletic administration. Through that, I did an internship in athletics at Middlebury College and got to experience many different areas of athletics and really fell in love with sports information. There were a lot of different areas in the field that I really liked. And yeah, I mean, kind of to what Shawn said, it was just a really good mix for me of a lot of different passions kind of melding into one job. So I interned at Middlebury for 2 years while I was finishing my master's. And then I got a full-time job at Wesleyan University, was there for 1.5 years. And then I just came back to Middlebury almost exactly 1 year ago.
Thanks. And Emily, you are also a little bit unique in this group as you no longer work in athletic communications, but can you just talk about the path that took you to working in the promotions and marketing department at Curry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started studying broadcast journalism at Lasalle. I had my own radio show. Really thought it was what I wanted to do. I was also a student athlete at Lasalle, and I remember thinking, like, who is this person behind the computer that takes all these stats and writes all these stories? Like there's like a person that does this. So that's when I kind of looked into sports information, talked to our sports information director at Lasalle, and really kind of fell in love with what they did communications wise. So shortly after graduation, I actually started coaching soccer at Curry until I found my first full-time SID job at Becker. Later ended up at Lasalle, later ended up at Wentworth. And with the way that the profession sort of developed, I really developed a love for graphic design and communication, social media. So almost exactly 1 year ago is when I decided to jump ship from athletics and work in marketing and communications office, just which focuses solely on everything that I love doing about sports information, just on a more general basis.
Thank you. And as a lot of you mentioned, as you all pointed out, excuse me, is that the paths that everybody took, while they're all different, I think the thing that's interesting about this panel is that it all it had a common hub when it comes to athletic communications. How you got there was different. How where you ended up is a little bit different. Just kind of sticking with that, is there something that happened along your career, maybe something in your life that kind of made you say, this is what I want to do? I guess I'll start with Emily.
Yeah, I think that obviously when I started as in sports information, the second that you feel that connection with your student athletes is when you're like, I really love my job. I really love telling their stories. And that's sort of where I fell in love with the whole communication, storytelling, social media piece of it. So I would definitely say that the relationships that I fostered with all of our students and all of our student athletes was definitely the moment for me.
Yeah. So a lot of you were student athletes. So obviously, I think getting into sports information or athletic communications kind of makes sense. But Kristen, you kind of mentioned that you started out wanting to study fashion and stuff like that. So when did that transition happen with you? What clicked with you that said, you know what, fashion isn't for me. I think I'm gonna look into athletics.
Yeah, so like I said, I switched my major after about a week. And it was just that those first few classes, being in those fashion classes, and I just kind of looked around and I saw how passionate, I mean, it was a majority female class. So I just saw how passionate these girls were about fashion, and I was just looking around and I was just like, oh my gosh, I am just not at your guys' level. I am not as passionate as you guys about this. And it was just it was just more of a gut feeling for me. I was just like, I don't really want to do this. And I just remember, after like my second fashion class, running to my coach's office, and I'm in his office crying my eyes out. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I want to stay at this school and I want to play for you, but I don't want to do this. And like, where do I go from here? And we sat, oh my gosh, we probably talked for hours and, trying to calm me down and figure it out. And we just kind of went back to my roots. It's like, what do I know? Well, I know sports. I mean, I grew up in such a sports minded family, and like I have two older siblings who both played soccer in college, one at D1, one at a Division III. And it was just like, why am I trying to do anything other than what I know best, which is sports? And, that's just kind of how I circled back to it.
Now, Allie, Kristen found out pretty early that what she went to school for isn't exactly what you want to do as a career. You actually, you finished your degree in biology and worked in the field for a little while before you realized that. Was there ever any doubt while you were in class or anything like that kind of said, am I doing the wrong thing here? Or how did that process work?
Yeah, it's funny. I went into my freshman year as a nursing major. I was in a nursing major for first semester. I got a really bad grade in one of my classes, so I was going to have to retake it, and was kind of like, I had never experienced that type of like adversity before. I in high school got straight A's, didn't need to study, and was all of a sudden kind of like this reality jolt of now I'm in college and I actually have to like study and put in the work. So I started thinking more about my major, switched to bio, but really didn't have like a plan. I was considering, PA school, also research, was pretty heavily involved in research, did a whole thesis for my senior year. But I don't think I really had a plan. And so I think when I graduated, I just got a job in a lab. I didn't really like think much about it. I was graduating and I needed a job. And kind of kept thinking that I was going to go to PA school or something like potentially med school. You need a lot of experience for that. So I just figured like a lab setting was a great place to get more experience. But at the time my boyfriend who I was dating, who's now my husband, he coaches football at the collegiate level. And so the turning point for me was really not being happy in the lab setting and then seeing him working with his student athletes, and just seeing like that relationship that he had with them, and just feeling like as a student athlete, I was so connected to everything in athletics. And that was kind of my turning point of like, okay, I think I need to like reconsider what my career is and look into athletics. So that was a little bit of a long-winded answer, but that's kind of how I ended up switching careers and figuring out that the laboratory setting was definitely not for me.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting story too, because I think a lot of our audience today, that if they're undergrads, they're probably getting ready. A lot of them may be getting ready to graduate, and they're thinking about what that first job might be. And some of them have studied their whole collegiate careers for one job. I mean, so I think your story is one that makes it clear that what you do right out of college doesn't necessarily have to be the career path that you take. Now, Shawn, during your introduction, you kind of mentioned some people that kind of mentored you or advocates for you early on in your career. Can you talk about those people and the important role that they play in terms of getting that first job or even getting the next job after that through that networking?
Well, I feel like I'll start with Jeff. A lot of the other people before that were in the business, so I think they were just advocating because they knew me personally to try and help me get a job. So I feel like that's a little bit different versus when you work with a boss, you meet the expectations that they're looking for, and you actively talk with them about advice they could give or having conversations about how do you progress. I feel like that's one of Jeff's strengths, who was my boss. He was the director of sports information at Castleton. Jeff went on to basically be like the second in command at Castleton as a sports information director, which I think speaks to his leadership skills. So the biggest thing, Doug, is just creating those personal relationships with people who could end up being your mentors. I think you can see it in pretty much everyday life, especially on social media, people trying to use people to climb the ladder instead of having real conversations that are meaningful. If you seek out people that you can have those conversations with, you have to be focused on what you're doing. So, you can do as many informational interviews as you want on Zoom or whatever, but if you're not asking people specific questions or things that are going to make them think and help you, I don't think it works out in the long run. And then just creating those relationships, if you're going to have someone who's going to mentor you, you're not just always going to them for stuff. Maybe you're checking in on them. How's their family? How's their life? How are things like that? Then someone's going to be way more willing to vouch for you in the long run. And I feel like that's what it was like with Jeff. When you spend 2 years with someone, you get to know them really well. And I don't think those things would have been in play if the two mutual people didn't care about the two people that were involved in the process.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, Shawn, talking about building those personal relationships beyond the professional relationships. Emily, did you have anybody in your life that kind of filled that role?
I definitely agree with all the things that Shawn was saying. I mean, for me, it really just took someone to take a chance on me, and that person was Matt Tittle from Becker. He took a chance on me, as an assistant SID, and I had never, worked in an SID profession before besides being a student. And I think in part that was, in thanks to a lot of the relationships that I had fostered as a student athlete. So I am such a big advocate for relationship building, personal, professional. It's one of the reasons why we're able to have this whole conversation, this panel, because all of us know each other through networking, and I just think that it's so great. So definitely just having that person that would take a chance on me, and that person was Matt, and that led to the next job, which leads to the next job. And the more relationships that you foster and that you keep close, is the more doors that will open for sure.
So I kind of want to go to Kristen on this one now. You're the one that is, I guess, the earliest in your career journey right now, graduated in 2018. Do you have any advice for people that are trying to seek out that first mentor or first advocate, and how to approach that?
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice would just to be, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I think sometimes, especially when we're young college students, I think we get a little, I don't know, maybe insecure, self-conscious, whatever the case may be, to reach out to someone and be like, hey, can I talk to you for a second? Maybe you think you're bothering them, maybe, whatever. But I think that, if you reach out to someone, more times than not, they're going to be more than happy to want to talk to you and tell you all about the great things they've done, or, or they would want to help you, especially if you reach out to someone, within the athletic department that you are currently playing for. I reached out to my AD at the time, and that was that first person that I really spoke to. And actually, she was one who pointed me in the direction of you guys and interning with you guys. And, I was so nervous to ask her to like, hey, can you just sit down and can I pick your brain for a little bit? And like I said, she was more than happy to sit down with me. She She wanted nothing but to help me. So yeah, I would say just really putting yourself out there. It's okay. They probably want to talk to you and help you.
That's a great answer, Kristen. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people sometimes think that, oh, I don't want to bother this person. More often than not, people are willing to have a conversation with you. And I think it goes back to what Shawn was saying, where they don't want to feel like you're just using them as a stepping stone. But if you try and make that personal connection, I think that's huge. Allie, if you want to add on to that, you can. But I'm going to kind of transition this into the next portion. Is once you've made those connections and you've got that first, you're making those connections that can put you into that first step. Obviously, the next step is interviewing for the job. And do you have any advice as far as prepping for interviews? We have one question from the chat, talks about the best ways to sell yourself for getting a GA position. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are going to go in looking for and maybe an internship or maybe a GA position. So how do you sell yourself for that first position when you don't really have a lot of experience maybe?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I think I went through it twice. First when I got out of college, and then second when I transitioned to a different career. And I think the biggest thing for me in both of those was how to use the skills that you currently have and apply them to the job you're applying to. And so you may not necessarily have the skills that are listed in the job description, but the skills that you've acquired, throughout your career at your college, as a student athlete, you can always use those, and they work, they're really transferable skills for any job that you're applying to. And so for me, that was huge when I was right out of college, applying for my first jobs, utilizing, the connections that I had made with professors, my coaches, that the networking piece in my senior year was huge. And then when I transitioned, again, just being able to sell myself, I had skills from my other career, and how would those apply to this new profession that I was, trying to transition into. So definitely there's always a skill that you have. You just have to really be creative about how it applies to that specific job and how you can sell yourself.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit on that. So you mentioned selling a lot of the skills that you as a student athlete have, or maybe some of our audience might have as student athletes. What are some of those transferable skills from being a student athlete that may translate into an entry-level job or in any profession?
I think the biggest one that comes to mind immediately is time management. I'm sure every student athlete is probably sick of hearing like how great you are at managing your time, but that's a really important skill in the workplace. And I guess a couple of others that are transferable for me personally, I was really passionate about my sport and really motivated. And I think that that's important in the workplace, especially for all of us working in sports. It's a very fast-paced environment, and you have to be able to kind of adjust to like what's going on because it is so fast-paced. And so having played sports in college, you're constantly having to change in game, or I mean, I ran track and cross country, but still like weather's, a factor there. So that, I guess those are a couple other skills that kind of come to the top of my mind.
Shawn, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I'd say when you're applying to these positions, and maybe you can highlight this in your cover letter in some instances, or when you get that interview, but really assess your own strengths and weaknesses, but be reasonable with yourself. If you're going for a GA position, the person on the other end is obviously going to understand that you're not going to know everything. You're coming into a situation where, like myself, maybe you had never worked in sports information, but you wanted to work in that field. So if you can understand and kind of showcase your strengths and weaknesses, especially with examples, like if you talk about leadership, like what direct examples can you have ready on hand for the interview if you were an RA or if you were a captain, and how you dealt with things. For me, specific example, on my interview, the phone interview, I said, no one's going to outwork me if I get hired for this job. I said, it's not going to happen. And then I was asked to elaborate. And I said, currently, I'm coaching high school track and cross country. I'm working at the Boston Globe. I'm working at Stop and Shop, and I'm like a senior in college, basically, right? So, and I said, here's how I time management, like Allie said, this is my day to day. And then talked about passion for working in sport, but correlated back to that. If you can show any of those tangible results with people who you're interviewing for, it goes a lot further than just saying it. And then just being prepared. You should know things about the school. You should know things about the person who's interviewing you. So if there are certain goals that you want to get out of the GA position or the internship, maybe you talk about how that person can help you reach those goals. So now you're building in a connection with that person you're interviewing. So they might remember you and say, oh, well, Doug really wanted to work on graphic design in this internship. Maybe that supervisor is good at that aspect. Any way you can make that connection between the interviewer and yourself is pretty massive.
Yeah, and Shawn, I'm just going to ask a little bit of a follow-up question. You mentioned kind of knowing about the school, knowing about who you're interviewing with. Do you have any advice on like how you could get that information, like how you can educate yourself on the position that you're going for?
Yeah, so I'd pretty much do research on anyone in the upper administration. So say if we're in athletics department, you want to know, how long the AD's been there, how long the coaches have been there, how long the assistant ADs have been there. What separates school X from school Y? Are they big on certain learning outcomes, or do they have something that's a niche that separates them from other schools? I think you can learn a lot about a culture if you see a lot of turnover in an athletic department, or if you see coaches that have been there for a while. And then, see how they present themselves on social media from not only a college standpoint, but athletics. And then, it's good to even know majors, or know about, if it's a GA program, like what majors you would be involved in or like to be involved in, and see what the program courses are. And maybe you can bring some of that stuff up on the interview. Like, hey, I really noticed that the MBA program through the graduate thing talked about, these type of classes. That's something I'm really interested in, having those conversations, with note taking, or if you get on the interview. But any research you can do to learn about the school, where people have come from to go there, any little bit of that information helps. And then obviously knowing the area, because some places you're going to apply to, there are concerns from people that you might not fit in the area that the school is in, and things like that. But more information is powerful than less, I would say. You just have to do your research and find what's interesting.
Thanks, Shawn. Emily, you were also, like Allie, you were a student athlete. Do you have any interview advice, especially as someone that also kind of transitioned away from athletics? Yes, you're still working in communications, but the interview process, as far as that goes, can you just kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, I would say that everybody in this room, being a student athlete, has such an advantage on other people when looking to start your careers. You all have such great transferable skills. Communication is a huge one. Teams always like to hear that they're going to hire someone who's really all about teamwork and all about communication, and who's passionate. So like I said, everybody here has an advantage. And same thing with Allie. Someone, student athletes are really passionate about their craft, and that's going to speak, wonders for when you go into an interview, and you can show how passionate you really are. And I just wanted to add about when you're preparing for an interview, definitely all the things that Shawn said are so on point. You really have to research, what position you're interviewing for, the history of the school, the history of the programs, and you always 100% always need to ask questions. And you can always set people up by asking this question, saying, oh, and here are my ideas to improve that, so that the people that you're interviewing with can show how you're going to advance yourselves, as well as how you're going to advance their program. And that's really going to make you stand out.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of one of the bigger issues that I see people have coming into interviews, is when it comes to, oh, do you have any questions? Do you have any maybe standard questions that you kind of go to, or maybe you could share what your preparation leads to as far as having questions ready for when that question comes up?
Yeah, I think I always ask in all of my interviews what the department's goals were in a year, in 5 years, and then picking something like I can pull right from my current interview. What are your goals, for user engagement and Instagram the next year? They tell me what their goals are, and I say, okay, well, here are some ideas that I could have to get you to that point. And that's where like, oh, okay, this person, did their research, knows their craft, and like I said, that's for sure gonna make you stand out.
Thank you. Kristen, a lot of what you did as far as like an entry-level position was your internships. So I think that's the entryway to a lot of people getting into any profession. Sometimes it's like a GA ship, as we've been talking about, but an entry-level position. So do you have any advice on how to make the most out of those internship opportunities? Sometimes people think of internships as, oh yeah, we're just doing the grunt work or whatever. Can you just share what your experience as an intern was, both with us and at Roger Williams, and I guess at Bryant too?
Yeah, I've had a lot of internships. I would say, what from speaking from personal experience, what I've done with all my internships is I've gone into it just, okay, I just want to be a sponge. I just want to soak up as much information as I can and get, as much as I can out of this. If you're someone who just shows up to the internship, does the bare minimum and leaves, I mean, you're not really going to get a lot out of it. A lot of what I've done, especially at Bryant, has been, again, putting myself out there, but also just, I understood my weaknesses and I knew what I wanted to improve on. So for example, I didn't really know stat crew. I didn't really know how to stat games. And so I would just ask the SID and I would just be like, hey, can I just come in and sit in the press box like during your game today? I'm just going to sit there. I won't, if you need me to help, I can, but I just kind of want to just soak in everything that's going on around me, and just see what's going on and get a better understanding of things. So, I would just say, soak up as much information as you can and, put in that extra time, that extra effort, even when I would come home. So for at Bryant, one of the things we do is handle the social media accounts. And I really, really wanted to build some of the team accounts that we had at Bryant. So I would go home and just, it sounds like, oh, you're just scrolling through Instagram, but I would scroll through Instagram and just go from this sport account to this sport account, whether it was a college account, a pro account, whatever it was. Just did that extra research on my own because I really, really wanted to, further myself and improve my skills.
Shawn and Allie, what do you two want to jump in on this? Because I know that you both kind of do similar things as far as looking at what other people are doing on social media. And can we just use that kind of to build on how you can build your skill sets by kind of observing what other people are doing?
Doug, can you repeat that question? Sorry, I was just typing into the chat.
Oh, I just know that YouTube you have the continual growth, continual education by kind of observing other professionals in the profession. Can you just kind of explain like your approach to that as far as making your department better by kind of observing what other people are doing?
Yeah, I can jump in here if you don't mind, Shawn. I think kind of segueing from what Kristen was saying about, looking at what other people are doing and getting the most out of each experience. I think for me, in the jobs that I've had, that's been crucial to kind of like grow our brands and develop what we want to do for social media. And so a lot of it is taking time on your own, whether you're at home at night, just on the couch, looking at what other schools are doing and not just looking to see things that you like, but seeing things that you don't like and that wouldn't fit with your school and your brand, because every school is so individual and so unique. And so you can't just take what, a Division I school is doing and apply it to any other D3 school and be good with it. So that's definitely been a huge thing that I've done. And I save stuff that I don't like. I save stuff that I like. I have a whole folder on my phone, on my computer, whenever I come across stuff, even if it's just a really small piece, graphic in terms of like a graphic or a video, I just save it. And that way, when I'm working on a project or there's something that I need a little bit of inspiration, like I have a whole folder and I can go through and just kind of, see what other people are doing. I think another thing for me personally, with the social media and the graphic design side is not being afraid to just be creative and just try new things. There's a lot out there that you can pull inspiration from, but sometimes some of the best creations come from just like being bored and throwing a bunch of stuff onto a canvas and deleting it and then throwing a bunch of other stuff. And finally you come up with like something you really like and so far from what you started with for what you like. So yeah, I think just looking at other people for inspiration, and then also to Kristen's point of being a sponge, I've really utilized a lot of my connections to grow my skills. So, whether it's like reaching out to Emily, I remember, several years ago when Adobe Spark was becoming big, she was one of the people that was first using it. And I just reached out and said, hey, like, how do I get started on this? I've never used it before. What she was creating was awesome. And she took the time out of her day to talk me through it. And then, the next 2 months later, people were asking me for help on it. So I think it's just kind of one of those things where if you see something and it's new and you've never done it before, whether it's in sports information or any field, reach out to people, even if you just have a small connection to them. And I think Shawn mentioned this earlier, but people are always willing to help. So, I called Emily, but, I've called Shawn probably a million times to ask for help on things. So just ask people, and that's how you develop your skill set. That's how you add new things to your toolbox, and that's how you're able to advance and really grow.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that we're talking about it from a sports information perspective, but it really is applicable anywhere, because especially as a new person coming in, sometimes people will think, oh, well, I'm just a new person. I don't want to like rock the boat. But sometimes those people have been there for a long time and they don't know what changes in the industry are happening. So Shawn, while we're talking about internships, I know that you, as the SID, have to hire your GAs, have to hire your interns and stuff like that. We talked about what interns have done. So what are you looking for when it comes to hiring interns or GAs or people that are going to work with you?
It's a great question, Doug. So first and foremost, the main thing I'm looking for is just someone with passion. Like if you can express to me in an interview or via email, I mean, we've had interns from everywhere. We've had a student that just graduated from Alabama a year ago that has interned in our department for 3 years as a ghostwriter for us. And that came out of a friend that I had that taught there. I did a guest lecture class about what sports information is, right, for one of their sport management classes. And that student, emailed me after we talked and said, I'd love to grow in my skills as a writer. Do you have any positions? And through conversation with him, we had him come on and he proved himself. And he's been writing for us ever since. So the first thing is passion. I just want someone to work hard. If you're an intern, I expect that you're wanting to learn. So if you're just coming in to fill a box or do a couple of things, I'm not interested. I'll take the lesser talented intern with more passion over the highly skilled intern every day of the week. So that's the biggest thing. And, coming in with clear objective goals, like I always love asking that question to see where the interns go. If you can tell right off, like the first two questions about, asking what they've done in the past in this field, or, why are they interested in this internship, and then asking them like what their goals are. Once you get through those first two questions, usually you kind of get a gut feeling like, okay, this person's going to work or this person's not going to work. So those are really the two things. And then the secondary stuff, obviously, if they can write, that's a bonus. I think that's sort of a lost art. And I'm going to sound like an old man for a second, but we text a lot and tweet a lot. There are emails that I get, turned off from just because of the way someone approaches the email, where a tone or spelling mistakes or things like that. I'm trying to think of the interns we've had this fall and this spring. They've pretty much all fallen under that bucket. They have a big passion. They know what their goals are, And generally speaking, they can communicate relatively well.
Thanks for sharing that, John. Emily, I want to go to you next and kind of ask a question about, so now you've had that first opportunity. Maybe it's an internship, maybe it's a part-time position. How do you go into taking that first foot in the door opportunity and kind of turning it into a career? Like what steps are along the way?
I would say definitely all the things that Kristen had mentioned is just to not limit yourself and to explore every single asset of your job, and even things that don't have to do with your job. Like I can, for example, when I was in college, I interned at Newton North High School. It was part of my coaching minor. So I just needed to, coach alongside a team. I interned with the track and field team. And obviously, like I said before, I am so all about personal relationships. That's just my personality. I'm a really bubbly, outgoing person. I think I use that to my advantage when I'm in the job search. So I met the athletic director. I asked him if I could, do anything to help. And that's when I got into game operations. And that's actually when I got into social media. I started their social media account in 2009. And now it's one of the biggest, they have the biggest followings in high schools in the state. So yeah, I would definitely just say, don't limit yourself, explore every opportunity and keep those connections, because, they're always going to help you along the way. As I was saying, when I graduated from Lasalle, I started coaching at Curry in 2013. And, come 2020, I come back to campus and I interview, and some of those coaches are still there. And some of those coaches that still gave me the time of day, just to talk, just to make a personal relationship. And they were able to vouch for me in a super competitive field. And I was grateful for that. And that's because, I put myself out there and made as many connections and relationships as I could.
Yeah, and we're going to start transitioning into the next topic, which is networking, and that's what all that building relationships and everything is. So Allie, I'm going to go to you first. I know that you are heavily involved in a lot of professional organizations. Can you just talk about their role in building a network, or how you got involved in that?
Yeah, I think when I really started getting involved with some of the organizations that you're alluding to, COSIDA, D3 SIDA, and it was ECAC SIDA, but now it's EastCom. For me, I was in my internship and it was 2 years. I was finishing my master's. And so I was meeting new people at conferences and getting to know people in the business that were potentially going to have job openings that next year for me, that would interest me anyways. And so, through that, I got to know a lot of really great people that have become friends. I mean, Emily and Shawn are two people that I met my first year, and look, we're on a panel together now, so I think for me, I wanted to get involved in being on some of those boards and those committees, because I felt like in my first 2 years of my internship at Middlebury, I had so many people that were willing to help me in so many different ways. And I just felt like there were so many people that gave back to me. And so I wanted to do that once I, had enough experience. And, to be honest, like the first year that I was on the board, I probably had the least amount of experience as anybody for, ECAC SIDA. And, but to me, that was like an opportunity to grow and get to know more people. And I still was able to give back to the next like generation of interns coming in that year. And, so that was kind of the reason why I started getting involved with organizations. I just felt like I had so many incredible mentors and in just 2 short years. And so I just felt like I was at a point where I could really just start giving back to others and helping other people. And I would encourage anybody to do the same, whether it's giving back to your college team. I've had my coach reach out to us about, just talking to the classes below us about things. So anytime you have an opportunity to give back to any organization that you're involved with, any team, it's really rewarding, but also, people have helped you get to wherever you are. And so it's nice to be able to give back to others to, allow them to get to where you are.
Yeah, I think you alluding to your team and the connections that you made through there, I think people think of professional networks as just like, oh, somebody that I might work for in the future. No, I mean, everybody that you talk to can be somebody in your network. Kristen, I'll go to you next. What have your networking opportunities been like? Where have you found opportunities to meet people that might be able to help you out along in your career?
Yeah, so I mean, early on, when I was an undergrad, you know, my network consisted of people just within the Johnson and Wales athletic department, my coach, my AD, whoever was in the athletic department. And it's really funny now looking back, some of those connections that I made weren't supposed to be professional connections. I had no intention of them. Our two facilities and operations guys, I was really close with them just on a friendly basis with them, as just because I was a student athlete. And now, I reach out to them all the time and they reach out to me, oh, do you need help at Bryant? Oh, we need help at Johnson and Wales. And, since they're both Rhode Island, I can just pop over. And then since college, since being in the GA position that I'm in now, I was fortunate enough to attend COSIDA, the COSIDA convention. Really early on, I got to attend as an intern, which was amazing and made a lot of connections that way. So if you don't know what the COSIDA convention is, it's basically this big convention once a year, and it's all the SIDs, marketing people, I think administrators. There's a lot of different people from college athletics. They go to this big convention and everyone comes from all across the country. So it's a really, really great networking opportunity. Met a lot of great people there. And then from that convention, I signed up for COSIDA has a mentor program, and actually Shawn was my mentor. And so really funny how that works out. But yeah, so I think I answered that question. I think I'm talking in a circle now.
Yeah, that's another great example. Allie talked about how she met Emily and Shawn, and you're talking about how you met Shawn and he was actually your mentor and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, you never know what kind of random connection you're going to meet. You might meet somebody at a convention and then be speaking on a panel with them a year later or something like that. Shawn, I kind of wanted to go to you next. Obviously, and this isn't picking on you or anything. Our other three panelists kind of had a built-in network being college athletes. Can you talk about how you built out your network, being quote unquote part of the general student population and stuff like that?
Doug, if you're trying to call me a NARP,
You can say NARP, Doug. It's fine. You can call him a NARP.
I just put it on the record. I decided not to run at Bridgewater State, so I could have been a collegiate athlete. So to Kristen's point, when I first started out as a GA, I was very much like locked into what Castleton had to offer. And then you kind of come in to your own confidence-wise as you continue to build into certain jobs, and you kind of see where your skill sets align. Then a lot of it was like just reaching out to people, emailing them, asking them like, why would they do like this type of campaign on social, or why would they do this in sports information, or how to learn from them on something. And then again, to Kristen's point, once you go to those conventions, you seek out people to build a personal relationship with them. We have a pretty wide array of people in a group text that has gone on for probably 10 years now, where those people are like family to us in that group text. And that all really started with us just having like common interests, talking to them at these conventions. And then one thing leads to another, you start learning from them. And then there's this built-in trust. I mean, I would say daily someone's asking a question in that group and someone's teaching what they know or how they feel. And those connections are just as meaningful as, say, for today, for example, I spoke with a gentleman who works at the ACC, and I just reached out to him and said, hey, I'm interested in your role. I'd like to learn more about it. And then within that conversation, actively listening to what he's talking about, asking follow-up questions, finding out more about how they do things versus we do things. And then now my goal is to eventually follow up with that gentleman down the road. Like if I see that the ACC does something cool in the space that he works in, might just send him a direct message and say, hey, thought that was really interesting, like hope all is well. and then you continue to just build on those type of frameworks that way. Some things won't work out, and then some things you'll turn into like the group text I mentioned, where you have 12 people that are really close and have become a family. So you just have to put the work in at the end of the day. Like, I think the common denominator here among the four of us, and maybe even the whole group that's you can see video of, is that all of our relationships are meaningful, and there's an understanding and a caring among all of us. It's genuine, more than anything.
Thanks, Shawn. Yeah, and I'd agree with all of that. Emily, do you have anything to add as far as networking goes?
Just basically everything that Shawn said. I'm in that group chat, and it did start at ECAC side at what feels like a jillion years ago. But it has been so helpful just to network with people and to just reach out for help. Like you said, Allie, earlier, people are always willing to help. Networking is so important. And don't be afraid to network to people that you think would never answer you. I remember I went to go stat a basketball game at BC one time, and I was so afraid because it was a big D1 basketball game, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm so scared to talk to these people. But I ended up meeting great people there, and I went back, made some more money on the side, and it just continues to grow your network. So don't be afraid, always reach out. And just as a sidebar, if you guys in the chat could just put what your majors are, I'm super interested to learn what y'all are studying at your schools.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. That's actually a really good idea. I guess since you're here, I guess we'll kind of use you as kind of answer this question in the chat. Where do people start looking for jobs? Do you have any exact? Where do you start looking for jobs when you're maybe when you were looking originally, or when you're searching now?
Yeah, so when I was in athletic communications, oh good, cool, strategic communications, sport and rec, like we were talking about earlier, COSIDA is a great organization for athletic communications and athletic administration. And that's, if you go on cosida.com/jobs, there are tons of jobs on there, and you can filter them from where you live or what you're interested in doing. And that site was really helpful to me when I was in college. I would check it all the time. And another more general one is higheredjobs.com. That one you can really filter in like your region, and that one's a much broader drop down menu of what things you could do, communications, faculty, all those things. So higheredjobs.com, cosida.com/jobs are two really huge ones that I had used all the time, and I can put them in the chat too.
Anybody else have advice on where to starting your search for jobs? Allie, I see you kind of shaking your head. Do you have some advice?
Yeah, I mean, Emily's suggestions were awesome. COSIDA was super helpful for me. NCAA job market is also awesome if you're interested in specifically working at NCAA schools. And then I would say, go to your career centers. I think when I was in college, I was really afraid to do that. It just seemed kind of like scary and so far off. But now, having like worked at a few different universities and colleges, they're really there for you, and they're really good about allowing you to explore your interests. So you may stumble across a first job at a college that maybe you wouldn't have even known about or thought about in an industry. Like I stumbled into sports information, so I would definitely highly recommend going to your career centers on campus and really talking with them, as early as your freshman year and as late as your senior year, because they're great resources. They're very in tune with every single job that's coming open, and they can definitely help guide you and start to narrow in on a more specific focus.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Allie. I mean, I know it's really easy to Google how to write a good cover letter. What should I do for my resume? But if you go to your career centers, you guys just spend an hour with them, and they will be able to construct your resume in a way that is so specific to what jobs that you're applying for, versus the general internet.
Yeah, I think that's all great advice. As they mentioned, kind of going towards your career centers. Obviously, right now we're talking about jobs in higher ed or sports information, but similarly, you could look at opportunities in whatever professional organization, trade organization that fits your major or whatever jobs you're looking for. So I think that's all great advice. Next, I kind of want to transition into, okay, so we talked about getting that first job. Now you're established, you kind of want to branch out a little bit more. We mentioned Allie had leadership positions, Emily's had leadership positions. Shawn currently serves as the president of D3 SATA. Habbel, I'm sure you have some leadership positions out there, right? So I'm going to go to Shawn first, though, and because I know that you've really stepped up and taken a lot of initiative in terms of taking on bigger roles and leadership positions. So how do you get into those roles and advocate for yourself, letting people know that you're ready for those roles?
So first thing I kind of did is had at convention really sit down interviews, conversations really with people who are currently in those roles or in a role that was close to like being at the top. So for example, all of you will know the name, but Sam Atkinson is currently the president of COSIDA. But I think when he was like, I don't know, third on the chart or whatever it was, I had asked him at convention if we could chat. And I asked him, you know, what kind of leadership roles he could see me in, or how could I get involved? And then you kind of pick away at each organization. So our sports info organization is very structured. There's D3 SIDA, there's COSIDA, there's EastCom, formerly ECAC SIDA. So you kind of pull on those strings a little bit, learn from those people what they've done and what they're looking to do, and then see if those align with your goals. And then if those align with your goals, whatever the organization is or the job description or whatever, then you kind of go and attack that and get, you know, your foot in the door, start networking with people, and see if you can get involved. The other thing is any sort of like sub organizations or subcommittees of any national or regional organizations you can get yourself in. That's going to be key. Obviously, you have to really do a good job of time management, but from a COSIDA standpoint, I kind of dipped my toes into a bunch of committees and just saw what stuck. And then the mentorship committee was one that I landed on that I really enjoyed, but I did some that I honestly did not like at all. The experience was like, it was whatever. It was a year. I learned some things and took the positives out of that. But as mostly everyone has said, you have to try things that are a little bit out of your comfort zone, and then you'll kind of find your footing a little bit. So that's the advice I would give. And then, you know, when your passion comes through and things start to click for you, then you'll start moving that ladder, and it won't be really something like that you do alone. There will eventually be people that will advocate for you when you're trying to get up the ladder, and it won't be like a lonesome fight, if you will. And that's the best part about it, is when other people start seeing your value, that's where you know that you kind of did the right thing in that regard.
Emily, kind of the same question. I know, what was it, 2 years ago? You helped organize one of the conventions, smaller conventions with, I think it was still ECAC SIDA back then, right? So just talk about your leadership role in that organization.
Yeah, so I joined the ECAC SIDA board, now EastCom board, in 2018, and 2 years ago, I'm trying to think because of how many conventions we've missed because of COVID. So our last convention, which I believe was 2 years ago, it was really an incredible experience for me. I learned so much, and organizing an event that was so successful. It's honestly something that I brought up in my interview at Curry. I had printed out my itinerary because I was so proud of what I had accomplished in terms of like budgeting, finding out panelists, you know, the whole thing. And it was just something that I was super proud of. And I think that it was easy for me to kind of step in a leadership role because of how I went through college as a student athlete. It's really easy for me to communicate with people and to reason with people and to reach out with questions. And I really credit a lot of my success and how I go about my professional career through athletics. Like I said earlier, everybody in this room has such a great advantage. Being a student athlete, your communication skills, your time management, all of that is going to be so helpful to you when you guys go into the real world.
Yeah, and Emily, I just kind of want to follow up on that a little bit, because obviously the budgeting and maybe a little bit of event management, but that's not really what the job is. So can you just kind of talk about how these opportunities kind of let you exercise skills that are maybe not part of the profession as a whole?
Do you mean like in terms of leading a conference, or?
Yeah, because well, like event management is part of a sports information role partially, but a grand scale event, all the budgeting and stuff like that, sometimes that's handled on a higher level. So can you just kind of talk about what those experiences, how those experiences helped you along in your career?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think working with a budget and kind of things that upper admin would do was really helpful for me. Actually coming back to Wentworth, I was at Wentworth when I did the conference, and I had been overseeing a cross country program, and it was my first time. Oh my God, I'm sorry. My dog is squeaking his loudest toy right now. So then I stopped. And so I remember coming back to Wentworth, and I had a really good grasp on things in budgeting and, how to prioritize where money was being spent and all those organizational skills because of a lot of the budgeting that I did with ECAC CIDA. So it's easy for me to come back and transfer those skills into my professional life as a sports information director. And yeah, like you said, event management is such a huge part of athletics. And I think I got enough event management out of those 3 days that I could run any event. You could throw me any event and I could run it, because just having to pay so much attention to detail in every single thing that we did really just broadened all my skills that I took, that I take to my, to my professional job every day. So it was really helpful and it was really fun. It was the best conference ever. And right, it was the best one ever.
Yeah, Emily is not lying, not at all.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about broadening skill sets. And I think in any job, you may be asked to do things that are not maybe part of like the general job description. Like I know, Ali, reading some of the stuff in your bio, you serve on a few other committees as part of the athletic department. Can you just talk about how like those roles and how you came into those positions?
Yeah, I think one of the pieces of advice that I would give to people is that at any job that you're at, if you're interested in advancing, let your supervisors know that and let them know what your goals are, because that is how I've gotten more leadership type of roles at positions that I've had and more responsibility, which, is great. 5 years from now, if I'm looking down the road and I want to continue advancing, having those experiences are really important to my success and to my continual growth. So I do sit on a couple of committees at Middlebury, the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. I'm the chair of. I got involved with that, I guess, this summer after the murder of George Floyd. I had kind of approached our AD about doing a video series. We talked with the DEI committee, decided to launch this new project. And just because of my involvement with that, they asked me to be on the board. And then, the chair left to take a job somewhere else, and they asked me to take that on. And so again, I think it's just important. Our AD knows my career goals, and he knows, kind of the areas that I want to gain more experience with and get more leadership experience. So him knowing that when the chair position opened, we just had a conversation about it. So I think, it just really starts from the beginning and just being clear with the people that you're working with, whether it's a supervisor or manager, what what you want to do, what skills you want to work on or attain while you're there. And then when a position does open or an opportunity does open, then they know that. They know it's in their mind. They've had that conversation, and hopefully they think of you first. for one of those, and you're able to jump on it and then continue growing your skills.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Kristen, you've had some newer experiences at Bryant that maybe you weren't expecting. Can you just talk about those as well?
Yeah, so as some of you guys know, I was able to be the color analyst for one of the Bryant men's basketball games, which was huge. One, because not many females call a men's basketball game, and two, it was my first time ever doing it, and that was something, you know, I brought up to my supervisor that broadcasting was something that I wanted to at least try. I didn't know if I wanted to really get into it, but I would never know that unless I tried it. So it was something I wanted to do. You know, I had an opportunity to do it last year. It fell through. So, you know, when we didn't have a color broadcaster for that game, it was immediate. My boss was just like, Kristen, you want to do it? And I was like, absolutely, I want to do it. So, you know, he knew immediately to ask me because I showed interest in it.
Yeah, and I think that's also a good example of taking advantage of whatever opportunities that come in front of you. It might not be something that you're 100% set on doing. Like Shawn had mentioned that he's sat on some committees that he ended up not liking at all, but he tried it, and he has that experience, and now he knows that if that comes up again, maybe he's not going to do that next time. So obviously letting supervisors know what you're interested in doing helps in terms of getting those opportunities. But have you guys ever experienced a situation where maybe people were hesitant to give you other opportunities? Kristen, I see you shaking your head, so I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced this a lot, just being so new in the industry. And also just a female as well sometimes. You know, just an opportunity to work with a sport maybe that I don't get to work with a lot, and that maybe they get you know, they're a more media coverage heavy sport, I guess you can say, so like a football or a basketball, let's say. And you know, so a lot of times people can be very hesitant to let me do something like that, like, you know, to stat that game, to call that game, to do whatever, just because they see me as someone who's so new, they're just afraid I might mess up or whatever, I might not be able to handle it. And so I've had a lot of other opportunities and things where I'm like, no, I've proved myself, you know, here, and here, so I can do this, and just advocating for myself and being like, no, absolutely not. Like I can 100% do this. I'm confident in myself, and, you know, let me do this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think advocating for yourself and having that confidence, I think that's a huge thing. Does anybody else have maybe another example or something that maybe didn't happen to them, something that they've observed that, or how it worked out? No, we all work for great bosses. Go ahead, Allie.
I mean, I think Kristen hit the nail on the head with just advocating for yourself. When you are young in any industry, people are going to look at you, you know, you don't have a lot of experience. And so they are going to be hesitant to give you responsibility. And so advocating for yourself is huge. And in those early years, it's probably the most crucial. The other thing I would say is that you can prove yourself. And so Kristen said, like, she pointed to specific examples of how she was capable and how she was able to, or how she could be able to take on that role. And so that's really important too, be able to advocate for yourself and point to those specific experiences. And then I think too, just not letting people like crush you early on when you are young. You know, Kristen alluded to this a little bit before, but being a female in athletics, you know, it's a male dominated field. And so there are a lot of instances where you're the only female in the room, or, you know, for me, I'm the only female, or I'm the only female and the youngest person. And so that can be really intimidating, but everybody brings something to the table. So just remember, you are hired for a reason and you have skill set, and not everybody that you're with, you know, has the same skill set as you. So just keep that in mind when you are, you know, trying to advance or take on a new role or learn something new, is that you are hired applied for a reason. They liked you for a reason. So just be really confident in yourself and be able to point to those experiences to hopefully allow you to continue growing.
Emily or Shawn, do either of you have anything to add to that?
Doug, I was just going to say earlier, we're talking about kind of like the second half end of the subject, but on the first half end, updating your resume routinely allows you to rethink some of your goals and what other type of objectives you want to complete. This might sound dumb to some, but I have these random reminders in my calendar that literally say, sit back and think for a little bit. And it kind of recenters me from, we're all living our daily lives. We basically have like a written to-do list and a mental to-do list, right? Sometimes you've just got to pull yourself away from that sometimes and allow yourself to think critically about the things you're doing, in every facet of life. And if you give yourself that space, however you do it, that's going to help you realign your goals or think about what you want to do to what Kristen has done and Ali has talked about a lot sooner than it would come to fruition because you're actively thinking about it. So I just wanted to add that part because I felt like we were talking about the end goal versus the start of it.
Yeah, Shawn, I think that's a great point to kind of, it's easy to get lost in the craziness of the world and just maybe just having those like reminders, like actual reminders, like physical reminders that are gonna, hey, take a step back, kind of think about things for a little while. That may be just as important as going out there and doing as much as you can. Just kind of taking those reflection times can be super beneficial. So we have a question in the chat that kind of relates to something specific to this year. Obviously, with COVID and everything, this year has not gone as planned for people. So just during the pandemic, having to adjust your work schedules, having to learn a new way to work, how has that affected your professional life, your personal life, in terms of adjusting to, I guess, what we keep on referring to as the new normal?
I will start.
Okay.
Because I started at Curry the day before everything blew up. And I went to campus, and yes, I had known the campus a little bit from being a coach a jillion years ago, but I got my laptop and I was sent home, and I had to work the first 6 months creating a strategy and building a brand off of a school that I really knew nothing about. So it was really, really challenging. And the way that I got through that is I have a great team at in marketing communications at Curry, and I continued to put myself out there and meet other people on campus. Somebody in this room, Kuda, was a great asset to me because he became my friend when I had no friends. And just continuing, like I've kept saying throughout this whole panel, just putting yourself out there and making relationships. And I got to learn the close community of the school. I got to learn all about it from people who had been here for 10 years, for 5 years, for 6 months. So that was really helpful for me, but it has certainly been challenging. Thankfully, everyone's safely on campus now, but it was a really rough start. And I'm really thankful for the people that I'd reached out to and that helped me along the way.
Ali, what about you? Obviously, we're not competing right now, so that's kind of adjusted your job. How have you had to adjust on your campus?
Yeah, similar to Emily, I started here at Middlebury in January of last year, so I really wasn't on campus too long before we were sent home. Luckily, I had worked here for about 5 years before, so I definitely was in a little bit of a different situation than Emily. But when I took my job at Wesleyan, and I was there for over a year and a half, My husband stayed here at Middlebury, and so we lived apart. And so one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that then I was home and we got to spend a lot of time together. So that was great on a personal level. And then I think in terms of not having games, I have still been just as busy as I would be if we had games going on. I'm just busy in a different way. So a lot of what our campus has been doing, of course, focusing efforts towards COVID, whether it's like helping out in testing centers, doing rounds on campus. We had practices in the fall. So I went around to all those games and got pictures of our student athletes. So just kind of trying to like reinvent what we're doing. But then a lot of my responsibilities here at Middlebury didn't change too much aside from not having games. I do run all of our social media and graphic design. So while it was different content, I've still been doing all of that. And then I write all of our feature stories. So again, even though we didn't have games, like that piece wasn't affected as much. So yeah, I mean, it's been up and down, I think, for everybody, but I think the ability to kind of adapt comes from working in an environment with sports where like everything is always unpredictable, whether you're in the middle of a crossover season or in the middle of a pandemic. So I think that definitely like allowed me to. And then I've really relied on our professional groups, COSIDA and others to just utilize people as resources. Working from home since last March, there's been days where it is a struggle, or there's days where I'm just tired of the pandemic like everyone. And so just utilizing my support system to just kind of recognize that it's fine to have a day where you feel off and you don't want to do any work, or, be in my sweats for a day at work from home, or not work out. So just kind of just accepting that we're just in a really interesting time and just kind of trying to roll with the punches.
I guess kind of related to that, and I don't know that anybody is going to have an answer to this, but I'll just throw this out there. For our students, some of them might be entering a workforce still in the midst of a pandemic. Do you guys have any advice for them as far as their job search as it relates to the current situation? That is not a softball question. That is a difficult question. Go ahead, Shawn.
Well, I think obviously it's contingent on, if you've got people in here who are coaches or want to work for sport and rec management for towns, or, working in strategic communications. I think that's kind of dependent on that. So I don't know if we need to reframe the question, or I can try and answer it.
If you could reframe it, that might help too.
I can jump in too, Shawn. I have a thought here, just like heading into kind of the unknown. When I was working in a lab for several years and knew that was not the field that I wanted to be in, it was tough. And so I think using that here as you're heading into like a really uncertain time is just that it won't be forever. And so, just trying to not get stuck on comparing where you're at in your journey of your career to anyone else. I think for me, I was really stuck on seeing a lot of my friends be in the fields and the professions that they wanted to be in and that they were super passionate about, and being like, I don't know what I want to do. And so I think kind of heading into next year with the pandemic, knowing that you may not be able to get internships or jobs that you want in the exact field that you want, just be patient and just know that like your time will come, and you can still gain valuable experience in a job that you're not necessarily super passionate about. And just, I think the biggest thing is like, just don't compare your journey to anyone else's, because we're all on different paths. And like all four of us here, we all have, gotten to where we are, and had many stops along the way that are so different from each other. So just that piece of not comparing, especially as we're heading into like just more unknowns, that everyone's going to be at a different place. And your success isn't measured on anyone else's, just your own. So I don't know if that answers your question really, but hopefully it's hitting at something there.
I thought it did.
It hit on
That's
a
great.
very good point. Yes, it hit on a very good point. As far as not comparing your paths to other people's paths, because as we've seen with all of you, though we have that common hub of athletic communications, everybody's path was different. And additionally, not worrying too much about the opportunities that you don't get. I mean, we've all missed out on jobs. Every job that we've gotten, we've probably all applied to tens, maybe hundreds. So it's important to remember not to get too distressed when that first opportunity doesn't hit right away. And knowing that you may have to take a sidestep to get to where you want to get to in the end. So
I just want to
Emily,
add
you
to
got
that.
something? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I would like to add, it's inevitable that at some point you are going to fall down. And I think that it's really important when you don't get the job is to follow up and ask what you could have done better. I was interviewing for an athletic director position at Mass Maritime a while ago, and I walked into a room full of cadets, and I was the most nervous that I'd ever been in my whole life. And it was the worst interview that I've ever done, and I knew it was bad, and I still reached out, said my thank yous. When I wasn't offered the job, I said, hey, Mike, can you tell me, what I could have done better? And he gave me such great tips. And I think that's really, it speaks a lot to your character if you're willing to reach out and ask how you could be better. And who knows, maybe down the line, they have a position in their marketing department and I go back there and they remember me as someone who always just wants to be better and reached out, even though, she was a little bit afraid and, it wasn't her best interview. So definitely learning from falling down is going to for sure help you down the road.
Great advice. All right, we're about 8 minutes out from our scheduled time. So I want to give this opportunity. Obviously, if anybody has any more questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. But just to let you all kind of give your last thoughts, any advice that you may have for our audience. And I'm going to start with Kristen.
So I guess my last piece of advice for everyone in here, I mean, I'm going to assume that everyone in here is a student athlete, and approach your career life how you approach your sport. That's how I kind of go about it. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. Obviously, time management, communication, things that people think of when they think of student athletes, but also, showing up on time. By on time, if something starts at 4, you're there by 3:30, 3:45. Being coachable is so important, and you guys are all coachable. If you're a student athlete, you are coachable. And you can also, another skill that you can transfer over is just, you can handle criticism and you understand not to take it personal, and you understand that sometimes heat of the moment someone might say it in a tone that isn't very nice, or you might take it a certain way, but again from your background in sports that okay, you're listening to what they actually said and not how they said it. And that's just my biggest piece of advice.
Shawn, you want to drop some knowledge on people?
Was trying to think while Kristen was going. Can we come back to me?
Oh,
Yeah, that's
boo.
All right.
I'll
Since
go.
Emily
I'll
booed,
just
go ahead.
keep saying everything that I've been saying is network. Make your relationships stand out. Don't be afraid to reach out. I'm speaking for all of us on this panel. Anybody who wants to email us just to ask general questions, please do that, because we are so willing to help wherever you are in your journey. A little bit of unconventional advice, I would say your senior year, summer, enjoy it. Enjoy being a kid, because that's what I did. And your job's going to come and you can work at that restaurant or, be a lifeguard for a summer and just enjoy it. Because the job will come and you will get your dream job, and just don't give up.
Oh boy. I'm trying to think here. Yeah, Emily's correct. Definitely feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'd be more than happy to. I just fell off my chair. That's embarrassing. I'd be more than happy to chat with anyone anytime, whether it's athletic communications related or not. But I think my final thoughts for the group would be, just be willing to take risks. When you're young and you're right out of college, you can take risks and do a lot of things that don't necessarily relate to your dream job or your career path. If there's an opportunity that presents itself to do something that's just totally unexpected or exciting, just take it. There's so many times where, to Emily's point, like I just was like, I need to get a job and I need to start like my career path. Like your time will come, you'll have 50 years to work. So the first couple years out of college, like just take risks and they may not pan out and it may be you end up on a committee that you don't like or something like that, but it's totally worth it. And your time will come to be working full time. So take risks and yes, just stay connected with as many people as you can.
All right, Shawn, we gave you some extra time. What do you got?
Yeah, it's not going to be earth shattering by any means. I would just continue to talk about just being intentional in what you're doing. If it's writing that cover letter, networking, maybe reaching out to Emily afterward. It's just important to have those set of goals. I would agree with Emily that with the way this year has gone after you graduate, if you can have some mental release and not worry about the job market a little bit, do so, because I think once you get back into the swing of real life and work, it's going to be a totally different atmosphere. So that would just be my main takeaway, is to just be intentional with the stuff you're doing moving forward. And honestly, in terms of before graduating, much like Emily said, she said have fun. Just don't turn down an opportunity as long as it's COVID safe. Enjoy the last spring semester you have, or maybe the last year. And don't really say no to anything if you don't have to.
All right. Well, thank you to all of our panelists. I'm going to turn it back over to our commissioner, Greg K, to wrap it up. Again, if anybody has any follow-ups, feel free to reach out to us. I'm sure the panelists will be happy to answer any questions via email and things like that too. Greg?
Doug, thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for being with us tonight. We have some other great panels that are in the works, so be on the lookout on the CCC website and also our social media channels as we announce those programs in the upcoming months. To all of our panelists, I cannot thank you enough. I was really looking forward to this group because I know how passionate and how wonderful all of you are. And how you've all contributed to the CCC in so many different ways. So thank you so much for your time. And as everybody said, I certainly encourage anybody that's out there in the audience to reach out to our panelists, reach out to Doug or myself. And I can tell you in our line of work, as the panelists said, everybody is willing to help folks who reach out for advice and direction. So thank you very much. Stay warm, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming panels down the road.